They bring Bush over to Sally and Mr. Vice President. This is Celerino Castillo, our senior DEA agent. How do you do? Mr. Bush, you're a hero for the country. And Sally said, Mr. Vice President, I got to talk to you. There's something really wrong going on here. They're flying drugs out of 4 and 5, and the CIA's behind it. And George Bush said, nice to meet you, and walked away. Yeah. Don't let anybody ever tell you there is no evidence. There is a mountain of evidence already in existence. Okay, it is irrefutable, it is ironclad. All right. Now, given that, I want to paint a little picture for you. I want to go back historically because my own experience is going to add a little dimension to this for you. Picture that I have a blackboard behind me, which I don't, okay? But say there's a blackboard, and we're going to say that right here is Southeast Asia. And then right here is the United States, and right here is South America, and over here is the Middle East, okay? Somebody was talking earlier about organized crime and CIA, and of course my opinion is CIA is organized crime. In the Second World War, some deals were made between the Office of Strategic Services and the Mafia in New Orleans. We were afraid of Nazi sabotage, so we took a guy named Lucky Luciano out of prison in New York. And and he guaranteed that there would be no sabotage on the docks in New York. We took a guy named Vito Genovese. I like that. Vito Genovese. And we let him go back to Sicily to spy on it so that we could invade Sicily when Patton went in there. Of course, they went right back into the drug business. They went right back into their operations. The bond is very, very close. Stop there. Fast forward to 1954. 1954, Dien Bien Phu. The French were kicked out of Indochina. Now, almost everybody knows that the Golden Triangle in Indochina is where most of the world's heroin has come from for a long time. It is the largest opium-growing region in the world. There are several others. The French, in order to sustain their war, had been paying the local tribesmen, the Hmong tribesmen, and Kuomintang, the Chinese who were kicked out of China, with opium, which was a long holdover from the British opium trade from the 18th century. When the French went out, we filled that void, and we sent some people to Indochina. Their names were Adderholt, Singlaub. Does that ring a bell to anybody? There was also a guy by the name of Paul Hellawell, and there was a guy by the name of Richard Stilwell. And these are the people that we sent into Southeast Asia, CIA, to take over where the French left. Extremely well documented. And one of the first things John Singlaub did, and one of the first things Paul Hellawell did, was to take over the payment of Kuomintang and other rebels with heroin. It was just the way you did business. As we moved closer to the Vietnam era, that trade began to expand because of the relationship between CIA and the Mafia. As we get to the Vietnam War, now again, picture I'm drawing on the board up here some other names. So if we fast forward to the Vietnam era, I'm going to write some other names in Southeast Asia. Theodore Shackley, station chief in Laos, later station chief in Saigon. Richard Secord, anybody ever hear that name? Nah. Richard Armitage, anybody ever hear that name? Erich von Marbod, anybody ever heard that name? Okay. Von Marbod was in the military at the time, Department of Defense. They all worked extremely closely together. Tom Clines is another one who was Ted Shackley's deputy in Laos. Extremely well documented. There are still living witnesses. There are Air America pilots still alive who later became involved in Iran-Contra. That we ran the whole war in Laos, which was completely outside of congressional oversight, with heroin. We've all heard the stories about heroin coming back in body cavities in the dead GIs. Air America, Air Heroin, okay, the Black Plains. In the last 19 years, I have spoken to more than a dozen former members of the U.S. Army Special Forces, the Green Berets, who were sometimes ordered to carry the heroin by CIA. We ran this whole war there on heroin money. That heroin money did not just pay for the war, it paid for a lot of other things. Now, what happened is, and the picture that I want to paint to you is, I don't know if anybody here is familiar with the disease of alcoholism, okay? I happen to be an alcoholic. I'm sober 14 years, okay? So I know a little bit about it. And What happens is that it's a progressive disease. One is too many and 10,000 is not enough. Once you take a little, you have to take more. And there's no way to stop until you crash and burn, until you eventually burn yourself out. What happened in Vietnam was that by 1970, the heroin trade had spilled over and we were selling it to our own GIs. 1/3 of the GIs in Vietnam were addicted to heroin when they came back. Okay, they were smoking it or tooting it. They get what's called a stomach Jones. Okay. So that war continued, I think until a military-industrial complex kind of milked it for all it was worth, and until white middle America took to the streets. Okay? 1975, it ended. Now I'm going to tell you about my story because this is where I come into the picture. I come from a CIA family. I was born in Washington, D.C. My father was an Air Force officer. He worked for Martin Marietta, building the Titan IIICs, which put up the Keyhole spy satellites. My father's cousin, Barbara, was CIA. Her husband, Sam, had been OSS even before CIA. They both did 25, 30 years and retired from the agency. My mother had been Army intelligence working in the code-breaking section in the Pentagon during the Second World War. So I come from a family of spooks, and I will tell you, it was a dysfunctional family. I was an honors student, I'm an honors graduate in political science from UCLA. I went there from 69 to 73, and I was one of 2 living Republicans on the UCLA campus during those years. The other one was a guy by the name of Craig Fuller. Now, I was chosen to intern for Chief Ed Davis at LAPD, having been groomed and having already been spotted as, part of the establishment, the in-crowd, an up-and-comer. Craig was chosen to intern for Governor Ronald Reagan. Craig was George Bush's chief of staff during Iran-Contra. As I was chosen to intern for Chief Davis, I was exposed to people from Army intelligence in an operation known as Garden Plot. I was told that I had a Q clearance when I was 20 years old, and I had to go home and ask my father what the hell a Q clearance was. I didn't know. In the Organized Crime Intelligence Division, I got exposed to one guy in particular by the name of John Xavier Bach, and I was told that he was a CIA-connected guy in LAPD. Well, it gets to where I'm just about ready to graduate from UCLA in 1973. I'm, magna cum laude, and the world is my oyster. I had interned for LAPD for 3 years. My family buys me a plane ticket. I go back to Washington, D.C., and I go for an interview with the CIA in the old executive office building. And here's this guy behind this desk with this huge CIA emblem on the wall behind him. And he says, Mike, I've looked at all your stuff. You're just a wonderful kid. You got a great background. You're in great shape. Blah, blah, blah. What we'd like you to do is to graduate from UCLA, join the CIA as a case officer, and a case officer is the highest rank within the agency. That's the highest level. There are levels above that, but, that's the creme de la creme. And we want you to then, after you're a CIA case officer, go back and go through the Los Angeles Police Department Academy, and LAPD will be your cover. I sat through the interview, and I got a stack of papers about that thick for my clearances, and I said, thank you very much, and I came back to L.A., and I threw them away, and I said, that's illegal, I don't want anything to do with that. I joined LAPD in 1973, was valedictorian of my academy class, went to work in an area called the Jungle, which is down near Crenshaw and Martin Luther King. Was having a great time. I was a good cop. I loved it. I never had so much fun in my life. I mean, it was what I wanted to do, and I thrived on it. I specialized in narcotics. And then I met and fell in love with a CIA agent. She came to my regular old cop bar, and we met and fell in love. This is what we call the unofficial recruitment. It was more fun than the one in the office, I'll tell you that. And she knew people in LAPD's intelligence divisions. I didn't even know who they were. She kept mentioning this general by the name of Lee Goforth. I go, well, who the heck is he? Well, he's a general, and he deals with terrorists. Wow, well, sounds great. Then she'd mention organized crime figures, Carlos Marcello, New Orleans, Hank Friedman, Dan Horowitz, and other names like that. And then she'd tell me things out of my confidential personnel package at LAPD. There are 2 packages, one in your division and a master one at Parker Center. And then after a while, when we got engaged,